Welcome to the Clutch Mindset Podcast. Today we have a special guest, our first guest ever on the podcast. He got his doctorate degree in physical therapy from Columbia. He also got his degree in biochemistry and social sciences from Stevens Institute of Technology. He is a certified strength and conditioning coach through the National Strength and Conditioning Association. He has worked with MLB, NFL, NHL, D1, baseball players, and soccer, marathon runners, and a slew of youth athletes. He has started his own business that he just sold over a year ago, where he works on the board. He now serves as a clinical advisor for them. He now works at Google Health and Wellness and serves on the board as a board member on Columbia University's program in physical therapy alumni board. Dr. James Sinodinos.
Yay. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks,
guys. Appreciate it.
Our first guest on the Clutch Mindset Podcast. This is an honor. I appreciate you making the time. We go way back, but I'm really excited for our community just to kind of get to know, and most importantly, how to deal with recovering. Because as coaches, we don't know everything on how, our athlete gets hurt or how to prevent them from getting hurt. And we just say, yeah, stretch, or yeah, put some, heat it up, put some ice on it. And this is why I feel like this is so critical for our community to kind of learn about recovery, health, physical health, and all those things, because it's not most of the part of the game.
Sure.
Yeah.
I could say this topic resonates with me. I'm super excited about being here to talk about this, because this is kind of like the origin story of my physical therapy journey. I get to college, playing baseball, playing at Stevens, awesome D3 school, and it's just the fall season. I'm not even in my spring season of my freshman year yet. We're going 4 days a week for 4 weeks, so it's just a pretty compact fall season. And I get to the end of the 4 weeks, and it's intense. It's more intense than my high school training was. So I'm really sore. I'm pretty beat up from just this 4 weeks of training. And it was the night before our last day. Our last day of the fall was a game that we had at Drew University. And the night before, I'm running around the bases, and I'm running around second base. My quads felt like jello going into that day. And I had been in the training room earlier that day, and I just slapped some ice on my knees and my quads, and I did not feel right. And I'm at practice. I'm running around second base. My cleat kind of gets caught up in the turf, but my quad just gives out, and I ended up just hyperextending my knee. I tore my ACL, my PCL, and that was like a critical moment for me in my life, because I went to physical therapy for many months after that, and I learned a lot about the rehab process, and that started my journey of wanting to know more about the body, how to take care of myself better. Got really close with the physical therapist that I work with at Ivy Rehab in Hoboken, and that prompted me to become a physical therapist and to learn more about what we're going to talk about today. So yeah, like I said, this resonates with me a lot, because this is everything. This is the reason why I wanted to do the career that I'm in now.
And that's usually how a lot of things start. It's like a lot of times you always want to be like the trainer or the coach that you wish you had, right? So now you have the opportunity to give back to a bunch of athletes so they don't go through experiences that you went through.
Yeah, like I could say for sure, like I know how to take care of my body better now than I did when I was in college.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's because of the education that I've done, but just out of personal curiosity and just wanting to learn more, and hoping to share some of that today with what the audience you guys have.
Yeah.
So let's do it.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
So we're going to start off simple question, I guess, but I guess there's a lot of complexities around it. When we talk about recovery, what is recovery to you as a PT?
Yeah. So the most basic definition to me is doing the things you need to do to prepare your body to do it all over again the next day. So whether it's working out, playing your sports, it's doing the things that you need to do to be able to perform at a high level on a daily basis. So when people think of recovery nowadays, we think about guys like LeBron James and how much money he spends on his body and recovery. But today we're going to talk about the stuff that's that anybody can do, starting at the youth level through high school, through college, things that everybody can do that doesn't involve $1 million hyperbaric chamber that LeBron spends time in, right? We'll talk about stuff that revolves around sleep and hydration and nutrition and movement and mobility and strength training and all the things that we can chip away at to make sure that we're feeling our best every day.
Yeah. I would say I work with a lot of athletes from, youth T-ball to had an opportunity to work with like a couple minor leaguers. And to this day, I still think like the two most underrated aspects of player development is mobility and recovery. I mean, there's still, it's one of those things that this is why this is important for our audience, is to educate them on what is recovery. And I have a couple questions further down I would love to, get your opinions on. But yeah, absolutely. Mobility, recovery are the first. Everyone wants to hit, everyone wants to throw. And now for sure, it's more knowledge on strength and conditioning, but the recovery and the mobility is by far the most neglected aspect that I've seen so far.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Dr. James, what for the coaches out there, right, that are dealing with, they're starting to get on that bigger field, 12, 13 through high school, what would you say is, what are the stretches that they should be doing, or how should they be warming up on a daily basis, these athletes, and what can you tell to the coaches on, like, this is exactly how you should warm up? Is it true you should be doing your calisthenics and then stretching, or just stretching your arms, stretching cold? Like, what are some things that you could kind of, just on the youth level?
Yeah, so I mean, going back to where you and I first met, I mean, Empire Baseball, they kind of had it right away. Like when I stepped in to work with you guys, dynamic warm up prior to getting into your sports specific stuff is the way to go. I trained when I was a graduate student at a place called EXOS in Phoenix. They have a lot of locations, but I was in their Phoenix location, which was awesome. And they had a couple of their own terms that they used for this. So one of their terms was pillar prep. So doing all the exercises to warm up your shoulders, your shoulder stabilizing muscles, your scapular stabilizing muscles, your core, not just your abs, but your entire core. So your obliques, your back, and then your glutes. So everything from shoulders to hips was the first thing that they talked about. Then movement prep was like their next bit of terminology. And that was more going, so pillar prep was very general, like get muscles activated, get primed. And then movement prep was like the sport specific movements that you're going to do. So for example, if you're working with like a sprinter and you're going to be doing a lot of just like short repeated sprints in a session, like you want to get very primed to move in a north and south direction, as opposed to like, just say you're working with some basketball guys and you're going to be doing a lot of lateral agility. Like you want to make sure your movement prep includes something that's lateral. So like prepare yourself to do the stuff that you're going to do in that session. And I thought that was a great way to think about it. Like get primed to do the things that you're going to do, and your dynamic session prior to a session is the best way to do that. To make it a little bit more broad towards just general team sports, I mean, you just want to go through all the movements that you could do in a team sport, and that I think should require some amount of going through full ranges of motion of every joint and getting everything completely warmed, and then in terms of static stretching, like you mentioned, I think that's best suited for cool down at the end of a session. And I think there's some pretty good evidence that supports that at this time. Dynamic prior, and then your basic static stretching afterwards. And we could talk more about some stuff as we get into this a bit more, but I think that there's like some great post performance stuff that we can get into too.
So what I'm hearing, going through full ranges of motion, hitting all your joints, moving in whatever direction that you're training to move in.
Yeah.
And we're going to save the stretching aspect for post-game or practice. Is that what I'm hearing? Just like simplify it?
I've seen a lot of, yes. Okay. I've seen a lot of like anecdotal things where You do muscle testing, so like objective muscle testing using handheld dynamometer, where you take someone that's cold, like they're just got on a treatment table or whatever, and you test one of their muscle groups. You do some static stretching, you test again. A lot of times their strength goes down, and that's not how you want to prime yourself for performance. Do something where you do a dynamic movement, and usually their strength goes up. We want to be lifting things up as we prime and not down. So that's the personal anecdote. I've seen that pop up a lot.
Yeah. With all the education you have, do you ever attend like a sporting event, the game, and then you see a coach beginning the game, they're like static stretching, you're back there like,
Yeah, I think overall, like, sports has come a long way. I think there's a lot of great people talking about this stuff out there. But yeah, sure. I mean, I've seen cases where, and I think that we know that we're not all the way there yet, because I have a lot of people that come to me in just a physical therapy clinic every day that ask like, okay, what stretching should I be doing? And then I have to go through the whole like, okay, let's talk about stretching. Let's talk about what you should be doing before you go out for a run versus what you should be doing after. And it takes a little bit of education still. So I know we're not all the way there yet, because people still ask about that all the time. This question that you're asking now. But I do have to say it's a lot better than it was 10 years ago, probably. I think the average level of education in sports about what you should be doing to get primed versus what you should do after is a lot better than it was. So we're going in the right direction.
And when nowadays, I feel like we're seeing tons and tons of like travel teams, AAU.
EXOS is a big topic.
Yeah. I'm gonna narrow the question. You're seeing like more than ever, kids and even like high teens, youth athletes, college, they're playing more games than probably ever before, right? I think we could all kind of agree to that. From high school to college, like they're playing a lot and they're constantly training. What are some self-identifying signs for those athletes? Because they might be playing for multiple coaches, that they could find like, I might be tired, I'm hurting, I'm fatigued. What are some things that I could check in with myself to be like, oh, I need to take a break?
Yeah. So a few things on this. If a player self-reports that they're feeling fatigued, that's like a asterisk right away, because it's a good idea to get in the habit of, as a coach, like if we're talking like directly to coaches right now, like ask your guys how they're doing on a day-to-day basis to get a baseline. Like don't wait to ask them when you think that they're feeling tired. Like see how they respond when they're feeling good, so that you know how they respond when they're feeling bad. I think subjective is a huge component of this, because guys in general, like they know how they feel when they're good and how they feel when they're not good. So like just ask your players. As a player, like, if you're dragging and you have a really high intensity day planned for that day, like just say you're set to like do a squat PR or something, like, you're training with your high school team or college team and you have a big lift that day and you just know that like you didn't sleep well the night before, you were studying for a test. I think it's like totally okay to be disciplined enough to say like, hey, I am fatigued today. Like I need to just like take a step back today. I can go for a PR another day where I'm feeling better. I think that there are some cool tools now to use. Like I have a lot of clients that use the Whoop and the Oura Ring, and those give you readiness scores. And I've talked to a lot of people now, and they seem pretty on in terms of like how it tracks your sleep, how it tracks your recovery, and it gives you an idea of when you wake up, like, are you ready to do the most intense thing today, or is it a day where maybe you need to focus a little bit more on those standard recovery things? Of course, not every person is going to be wearing a Whoop or an Oura, and I have found that people that wear those say they get to a point where after a few months, those tools just allow them to become more self-aware, that they have a pretty good idea of, are you ready for an activity? Are you ready to perform, or are you not? So I think in the end, like, if those tools allow you to just become more in touch with yourself, and I think that's what they're best for. And lastly, just from like a more objective piece as well, like I've seen cases where heart rate's a really good sign of how fatigued someone is. So with like a standard, Apple Watch or like something you can use to track your heart rate, if your resting heart rate is higher than it normally is, then that's a good piece of data that maybe you are more fatigued today. If like your baseline walking around just before you even get into activity is higher heart rate, higher exertion, then that's probably a good sign that you are fatigued and not ready for the highest level of performance for that day.
Yeah. No, I think also too, like in a perfect world, I was telling Chris that in my opinion, when it comes down to like sports, I always feel like soccer is always ahead of the game. You know, they wear like the catapults, you know, for practices and stuff like that.
Yeah, they were on that a long time ago.
But, you know, of course, like a high school program might not have the budget for those things. Yeah. So there was like some type of company that created like a cost-effective way that, you know, you have X amount of devices where you can provide your high school players. And of course, that would prevent a lot of injuries. But sure, like that's at this point might be unrealistic for programs to have, but that would create a perfect world of less injury.
And I think that's a really good segue to talk about just like general workload in general, because that's something we've learned a lot more about in the last years too. Those catapult devices, like, and other things that capture like how much mileage is a player doing in a practice session over the course of a day, a week, a year. And then you can get a good average to see, okay, is a player exerting themselves on any given day way more than what their capacity is? Just say a soccer player, like you mentioned, just say on average they're running like 7 miles in practice. And then you have a really intense practice session where they run 13 miles and there's a spike across their like chronic workload. A player who has a lower baseline or a shorter training history might not be able to handle a spike as well as somebody that has that like years of workload built up. And this is something I think we'll talk about throughout this as well, but that's a huge part of recovery, is playing the long game with this. And like, it's so much easier to recover when you have a great working capacity for what you're capable of physically doing. Yeah, that's a huge part of this. So like acute on chronic workload, looking at that and managing that, like you said, there's like objective tools that are great for that, but even just becoming self-aware of that is so important too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you mind if I ask you guys a question? So you brought up the AA youth, and I think this is super interesting. So like you said, there's in America, there's so much emphasis on playing games, and it seems like other countries might be getting this better. Like if you look at the NBA, who are the best players right now? Mostly European dudes, right? Or Canadian dudes. So what are they doing that's so different than us? Is it purely just focusing on practice and fundamentals, or do you think this emphasis in the States on playing as many games as possible? Like, what are you guys seeing as coaches with this?
So I might have a different perspective on that per se. So these guys are the best in the NBA. Like you talk about Shai, it's like Gilgeous-Alexander,
Giannis, Jokic, Luka.
But I also feel that they are the 5 out of the country that make it compared to like the NBA that are just like tons and tons of great athletes. I personally think the games are getting a little too excessive, especially because there's not enough emphasis on practice. So it's a highlight culture when we talk about basketball.
Yeah.
So they're being taught how to make the move for the highlight and like very much ISO. And in Europe, it's a lot more team chemistry, a lot more help defense, kind of understanding the dynamics of what's happening around on the court, compared to the NBA where it's like, can I jump the highest? Can I move the best? Can I move the quickest? Can I, do all these things or shoot a 3? These guys kind of could do a little bit of everything without the emphasis of the dunk because they don't care about the highlight because they want to win and then play the right way.
Do you see U.S. culture changing over time, or do you feel like we went too far down this AAU and travel ball rabbit hole?
Even just coaching basketball now on the high school level, it's like, look at this highlight, look at this, look at that.
It's tough to overcome that.
Now they're making schools that specifically are targeted for that sport, and they're playing all year round.
Yeah.
And then it's like, what does their recovery team look like? Do they even have a strength and conditioning coach? Do they have a nutritionist? Some of these kids, I know some kids that are playing like 100 games a year, if not more. And now AAU, they play multiple games in a day. So, and they're playing, 32-minute game, or sometimes they play 40, like 2 20-minute halves or 60-minute halves. they're playing, 3/4 of that game, and they're playing multiple games that day,
Yeah.
and that's why you see all these, a lot of college, or once they get to the NBA, their bodies break down. I just think of like Lonzo Ball, who's played, probably over 100 games a year in his high school career, like, training, but, they get to the NBA and their body just shuts down.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's a good point too, where like I was just talking about how you have to build up that base of like chronic workload so that you can handle those spikes in training. But there's also something to be said about building up your workload with a variety of things and not just one specific thing. And I think it comes down to like student athletes have to be athletes. They have to just be an athlete first before you say I'm a baseball player. When you're young, like it's so beneficial to play different sports, to move in different ways instead of hyper focusing when you're 12 years old on one sport, so that you can go to a specific AAU team or a specific school, because that's going to get you the most exposure. I think, again, if we're talking about playing the long game here, just playing a variety of sports is so crucial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, at least for me, I can't speak much on like the other sports, but I'm in deep with baseball. One of the issues that I have and see is I like to compare it with I'm a big MMA, UFC, boxing guy, right? So it's that one fighter has a camp and they're all in tune together. So you might be the strength coach, he's a skills coach, he's a recovery coach, but they're all in tune together. So they know, all right, well, there's no point in having this guy do this today because he's doing this. But what I'm seeing is that, well, this kid is training here, and then he's also training here, and he's also training here and here. So where's the communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm programming for a kid to do speed and agility today, but he just ran 15, 25 sprints with his coach yesterday, what's the benefit for that? So the perfect scenario, and I go bring back soccer as well, is that I feel like the soccer programs here in New York, per se, you go to Westchester, you have these big programs, everyone's in tune, right? There's not so much, all right, well, I got to go to this hitting clinic and this pitching clinic because he's the next best thing, or he posted this on Instagram, it looks cool. They commit to one program for at least a year, right? I would say give like a program a chance to work.
Yep.
Because if you're hopping here and here and here just off of weeks, like it's, what's the point at that stage,
I think probably the most relevant thing I can say today is like no amount of recovery tools or gadgets or like things that we could talk about later too, like no amount of ice bath or sauna will ever make up for bad programming, right? Like if you have bad programming, you can't make up for it by doing all of the fancy stuff. It just will never, it's going to catch up to you. So that's a great point, where it's like if you have a team that's working together, or an athlete that's really self-aware about what they're doing and what they're putting their body through, like that's way more important than like, jumping in the sauna for half an hour.
Yeah. And then when it comes to baseball, just like you have like the pitcher, and then the pitcher pitches for his team yesterday, and now you're pitching for a new team the next day.
Hey.
And I feel like it's so outcome based, especially when you're talking about trainers. It's like, oh, with this guy, I hit better, but I went to Ryan for one day and I went 0 for 4, so it must be Ryan, not me. It's like everything, especially in the parents' eyes, because most parents, who played baseball as a parent, like you get it. That's someone that played on a decent level, and all they see is outcome. They don't know, but they know my kid struck out, and I just had a lesson with Ryan. So now Ryan is probably the worst trainer here, probably not going to go back. And that's just kind of like how the cycle goes.
Yeah.
And so they go bounce here, they bounce here. Oh, my kid plays here and then there. And he's pitching. He's the ace there, and he's the number 2 here. But we went to South Carolina and played 27 games. But he threw 37 innings in 3 days as an 8-year-old. Yeah. And, you see that, I'm sure. So that's just kind of how the cycle goes with that. I always feel, with the baseball stuff. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, getting back on track. Talking about injuries and arms. What are some things on a consistent basis? Even if I'm not going to work out that day or train that day, should you still be stretching? And what are some like consistent stretches or something that someone should be doing on a daily basis as an athlete?
Yeah. I think the most, like, talking about getting the most bang for your buck, like the best thing athletes can do are prioritize getting like 8 to 10 hours of high quality sleep, meaning like you turn your phone off 30 minutes before bed, you like make sure you get to bed on time so you can get that full amount of sleep. I think that's huge because kids, like, sleep is like critical for muscle repair, muscle growth, and motor learning. So just say like you do a lesson with a kid and you're working on a new skill. Like the time where that stuff encodes into our brain is like while we're sleeping. Like our brain is creating new patterns while we sleep. And if we're getting broken sleep, if you're getting to bed too late at night and you have to be up early the next morning, like all that stuff like really works against you. So in terms of like a daily thing you can do, like just getting good sleep is so important for development as a youth athlete. Getting up in the morning, prioritizing drinking lots of water, eating a protein rich breakfast, getting good nutrition on a daily basis where you're eating like whole foods, protein heavy meals, like all of those things that help with muscle repair, muscle growth, like all those things are, I think, so important. Then getting into the movement piece of it, stretch, like what are things that you can do on a daily basis? Like I think it's great to like constantly just assess like where am I at? Like just say as a catcher, right? Like I have to be able to deep squat for long periods of time. So you get up in the morning and like you say, okay, like how does my squat feel today? Okay, my ankle feels tight. Okay, let me focus on that. Like constantly like having a process for yourself to just like self-assess. I think that as a pitcher, like one of the things that we've seen is that after a pitcher throws, there is a document, like research has showed, there's a documented loss in shoulder flexions, like your overhead reach after you throw, and that's a combination of maybe lat tightness from just working so hard during your outing, and other muscles that had to work eccentrically very hard, and so like prioritizing doing soft tissue work after an outing, after you throw, to restore your full mobility. So having those checks for yourself, with pitchers, I think it's great to like stand against the wall, back against the wall, and then like reach both your arms up. And if you can like easily touch your arms to the wall, then okay, like in terms of overhead reach, like I'm good to go today. But if I pitch and like all of a sudden my throwing arm is not touching the wall like the other one, okay, I got to focus on rolling out my lat and doing some stretching for my posterior cuff. Things like that, where like just have those things for yourself to know, like, am I moving well today or am I not moving well today? Check that on a daily basis. And
That's a check.
yeah.
Do that.
Yeah. So I think like focus on the big important things, sleep, nutrition, like those are things you can control every day. And then check how your mobility is, and it's great to have, some guys just like work great with routines. Like I do the same thing every day. I do the same 10-minute routine every day. I open up my hips. I know that's a weak point for me, and that works really well for some people. And other people, I think it like that, self check is a good way to go. So I think it's just a matter of finding what works best for each individual athlete. Hey, do I have a consistent problem, or do I just need to do some overall maintenance every day based on what I need in that particular day?
Yeah. So most injuries, from what I've been told, every time I've gotten an injury, and the doctor always kind of said, it's like if I have a hip injury, it's because there's another weak part in my body, right? It's like weak glutes, or maybe not ankle mobility or things like that. How does a coach that doesn't have this type of experience, or a athlete that doesn't have that type of experience, would you recommend them go see a PT or strength or stretch coach? Or what is your kind of, in your professional opinion, how does one even know that I have a weak calf muscle, and if I get that stronger, I could prevent?
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to what I was saying in the beginning. Like, I wish I had this stuff when I was younger, because maybe I could have avoided some stuff that happened to me. So, yeah, finding some movement specialist, and ideally somebody that kind of knows the demands of your sport, because every sport is different. So, baseball, for example, pitchers are just going to have more shoulder external rotation and less internal rotation. So if you go to a specialist, they could be a great movement specialist, but if they look at you and say, "Oh wow, that's so asymmetrical, we need to fix that," like that might not be the right person for you. It's like finding within that sport, like what are the things that we actually need to correct. as opposed to someone that's just going to sweep in and say, okay, we have to fix all these things. Like find someone that really knows your sport and what you need to be able to do. And I think that's totally a good thing for any, like starting from youth sports through college and beyond. Yeah, find a person you trust, because it's hard for a coach. A coach has so many things on their mind, right? Like it's hard for a coach to also now say, okay, like is every player's hip mobility where it should be? Like it's hard. Like find a person you can trust and work with that person.
Yeah, I think it also requires, I see a lot of gatekeeping, like with certain players. So if you have a stud kid, right, throws hard, hits hard, runs fast, being okay with, all right, maybe I am not the right guy to do exactly that.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Right? Because I see a lot of guys who are like, fine, you might know how to lift a little bit because you're fit yourself or whatever the case, but it's different than providing him a legit strength and conditioning coach, or just because you kind of know a little bit about fitness. All right, he just came back from Tommy John. Maybe you shouldn't be the guy to do that, because you should send him to a physical therapist.
Yeah,
for rehab.
I'm sure you guys see this, but I follow a bunch of baseball training facilities, and I'm sure there are places that get very, like they want ownership over particular guys that train at their places, right? And it's like they want to keep those guys in house, like you're saying, and yeah, like you just got to know what you know and what you don't know, and if you need to outsource. So like one of the top New York State baseball prospects trains at one of the places in New York, but one of my buddies is a physical therapist in Jersey, and they've reached out to him to say, hey, like, we have this kid, and we want you to take a look at him. And a place they could have not done that. They could have not made that referral. They could have tried to keep him in house, fix him with their own strength and conditioning person. But I think that's super honorable. Like, reach out to people that you think do good work, and in the end, it's all in the best interest of the athlete, right? Absolutely. Like, don't keep someone that you think going out of your own house can do potentially better for them. Do what's best for the kid.
I feel like that happens a lot, especially specifically in the city.
Yeah, for sure.
It's each other.
Well, it's of course, it definitely helps a business where you can say, well, the best player in the city trains with me. Yeah, for sure. But like you said, it's always should be in the best interests of the athlete.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's it's very places want to be able to say, individual coaches or facilities want to say, oh, well, we have this many college commits, we have this many pros, and like that's great to be able to say, but like I think it's just as honorable to say, like, hey, this kid we sent to a PT because he had something that we couldn't fix ourselves, and now he's super healthy and didn't have surgery. Like, being able to say that's just as cool as being able to say we have this many college commits, right? Like, prioritize the kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how would you say when those kids do get injured, maybe it could be something, I guess, on a scale, right? It's not like maybe Tommy John or an ACL, but my arm is hurting. Maybe I got a little bit more inflammation in my shoulder. What's like the best way to reintroduce, like, starting to throw again? And what are, like, is it really just, I know my body, and when my arm's feeling good, that's when I'm good to throw again? Or is there something more to it?
Yeah, so I think this is a good point to talk about, like, this analogy that I like. So just say you're a person is walking around with a rock in their shoe, and after a while that's going to start to hurt, right? So they go to the doctor and say, hey, my foot really hurts. And the doctor says, okay, well, go put your feet up and rest. And, after a few days, he's resting, he feels a lot better. And then he goes to walk again, and the rock is still in his shoe, and he's, oh, my foot hurts again. And I think that's like kind of physical therapy in a nutshell, where it's like, okay, well, rest helps you feel better in a short term. It can help you feel better short term, but long term, you have to take the rock out of the shoe, right? So you have to find what are the things that led to that pain in the first place. Pain is a signal that something is going on. It may not mean that there's damage. Like, pain doesn't equal muscle tears. Pain doesn't equal herniated discs. Pain doesn't equal fractures. It can, but not necessarily. So the most important thing is to figure out, like, what is the reason my body is producing this signal? The signal is like, hey, I need to reach out to somebody about this. Like, let's get this checked out. So if you're a coach and your player has pain, say, hey, this is a signal your body needs to get checked out for something. So to answer your question about, like, getting back, like, I think it's not advisable to say, okay, I pitched, my shoulder hurt, I rested for a week, now I'm going to go throw again. Like, I think that you need to like take kind of a real evaluation and say, okay, there was a reason why I was in pain in the first place. And let me go to somebody to really check this out so that I can fix the root cause issues and throw pain free.
No. And how important would you tell athlete, like high school, that playing multiple, that's pitching, this, that, how important would you tell them that if you're tired or you feel something in your arm, to say something and not throw, right? Like what is like worst case? I mean, what, tearing a rotator cuff is the worst case, or like you know, like I feel like we have a lot of kids that pitch through the pain for the team or this and that. Like how bad is that?
I hate to like downplay competition because like no matter how old you are, like, you know, kids want to win. Anybody wants to win when they play. So like I don't mean to like say, okay, you're 12 years old, doesn't matter, your championship doesn't matter. Like, of course it matters. Like it matters in the moment. It matters to your team. It matters to the people that are, you know, have practiced and worked hard to get to a certain point. But like you have to do the risk analysis. Like if my elbow really hurts and my team is throwing me out there to close out this championship, like does it matter that much to like suck it up and do it for the team as opposed to like your long-term health? Like what if I have to sit out a year because I had surgery and I lose a whole year of when I'm 13, or like critical prime year of your youth? Like it's not worth it in my opinion. And look, I'm sure all of us have played hurt to some extent, right? I don't mean to be this guy that's up here saying I sit out every time I was hurt. Like that's not the case, right? We've all played through stuff, but you know, you have to know, like if you're really tired or if you're really hurting, like life will go on if you sit it out and, you know, make sure you get better first, and then you'll be better the next year for your team. And I think that's more important.
Yeah, I agree. I just feel like someone needs to say it, a professional or a bay. So
I'm curious on like how do you, so the foundations of this podcast is like on the mental side, sports psychology. How do you manage having an athlete who, let's say they were getting ready for like their senior year, or, you know, they have to sit out a season like a Tommy John or ACL and all that stuff? Like how do you manage their mindset coming for that injury?
Yeah, I mean, I could speak from personal experience because I had to sit out a year after I had my knee surgery, and that was, for me, like kind of super depressing. Like so my personal scenario was, it was my first year in college. I had been playing baseball my entire life. I never had like a real injury that kept me out for an extended period of time. I was very lucky prior to that. Now I'm completely, not even just from baseball activities, but like I wasn't even working out at all. So I was in a place where like, okay, this is the first time in like 15 years of my life where I'm just not participating in something with a team. And even if you show up and you show your face, and you know, that's it doesn't scratch the itch, right? So like it was super depressing to go through that. And I was like, okay, this is the first time in my life where like I'm not actively doing what I love to do. And I found a lot of joy in doing the rehab process. Like luckily that process, like, you know, really fulfilled me and got to the point where I was better. I got back to playing baseball. I feel, like I said, I feel great now in my life. My knee never bothers me. And so, you know, but in the moment it's really hard, and you have to find some things that ground you a bit, because it can be a dark place. I was lucky that I had good people around me at the time when I was in school. I was away from my family for the first time too, and I have great friends that were around me. And you have to find that, like you have to find what's going to give you fulfillment, because a huge part of your life is going to be ripped away if you are out for a year, right? That competition that you had for years before that is not going to be there, and you have to figure out a way to still actively participate in something, whether it's the rehab process or a different way to help your team, or like just learning, studying the game more, whatever you can do to keep yourself engaged, you have to do. Otherwise it's mentally challenging.
Yeah. Just to piggyback off James, when I work with athletes that go through injuries or you know, any type of performers, the problem is that they self-identify as that. Right? Like you self-identified as a baseball player, right? You didn't fall in love with PT until this injury. So you wasn't like, I'm going to school for PT. Yeah. I'm going to school to see what's going on and to play baseball. you know? So when you self-identify as that sport or as that thing and it gets taken away from you, who am I as a human? Like, I have no idea what I actually like or what I do outside of this
Yeah.
activity. So now it becomes scary because every it was all everything was already done. I wake up, I go practice, I have a game, right? Everything was circling that, and now that's not your world anymore. And that does become a very scary place where people go into depression and they have to find what other joys in the world and really do some soul searching on like who they are as a person, right? Which is almost good if they do find it, because now they realize that I'm so much more than just a baseball player.
Yeah.
So much more than just a runner or, a dancer or this and that.
I think that has to be part of the recovery process, right? Like, so, after injury, like, you spend a lot of time on your body, but it's a great time to spend some time on your mind too, and just refocus of like, why do I love this so much? And what do I want to get out of this time in my life? And like all that stuff to just reset it. Like you said, it's a great time to reflect and be introspective when you're dealing with injury or coming back from something at any age. Whether you're in high school, you're thinking about the next step of your life, going to college, or you're in college, and it's a good time to think about, what am I doing now? What am I going to do next? And yeah, I think that's what should be mandatory for anybody that's going through something really critical like that.
Yeah. And that's why we kind of do this, and why, like, any type of therapy or, specific in sports or performance psychology is so important, because, from a young age, a lot of people have dedicated their life to whatever performance they do.
Yeah.
And when eventually it goes away, whether you've played professionally for 20 years or, you play 1 year of college or you stop playing after high school, it all goes away. And now you have to figure out, I'm not Chris, the baseball player anymore. And now what am I going to do with my life?
Yep.
My dream is gone. So what's next?
How?
And that's why I feel like this, and then what now that schools are implementing these type of, mental performance consultants and sports psychologists, especially in these bigger programs, like, the heavy, bigger D1 programs, because not everyone's going to make it. And that's going to be tough on a few individuals that played their 100 and something games a year to get to where they are.
Yeah. To speak to the that dynamic of the mental health professional and the physical health professional. So not sports related currently in my current role, but it applies. So I am the in-house physical therapist for one of Google's health and wellness centers. So I work with solely corporate clients full-time currently. And on site, we also have psychiatrists and psychologists, and we have a lot of overlap of the clients that we see. And it's really helpful for us to communicate with each other, because there are people that have debilitating back pain and neck pain and shoulder, all different kinds of things. And then when you learn more about the person, like what anxieties that they're dealing with, what's going on in their life socially, what's going, and how all that plays together is so important, whether it's sports or in life too. So yeah, the work that you guys are doing is important, because it's important to give the message out there that like the mental and physical health have to go hand in hand in life. Like in sports, of course, like you want to get the best out of your athlete. You want the athlete to get the most out of their experience playing, and combining those things together are huge. But in life too, like, physical pain is not always just physical, and mental things that are going on and have physical implications on people. So that's a huge takeaway in my career at this point. It's not, when I started my career, like I was very focused on the physical biomechanical aspect of physical therapy. And the biggest way I've expanded in my practice is understanding how much the mental side plays into physical therapy. And sometimes when people come to physical therapy, they say, oh wow, like this is a lot of therapy. Like this is a lot of like, yeah. So, that's why I was really excited to come on with you guys today too. Cause these things go hand in hand. It's so important to talk about this stuff. It's important that people know that, this is something that can take their life, their playing career, their professional career to the next level.
Yeah. I want to talk about, one of the things that I mentioned in the last podcast we did was Like, to me, the worst coach is a coach that is set on their ways and doesn't try to like pursue like further education. All right.
Mhm.
So my background is really data analytics. Like, I'm a big numbers guy. Like, I saw myself in the industry as the middleman between like the performance coach, putting like reports together, like, and then providing it to the athlete or the coach to provide, for programming. But I see a lot of, like I mentioned before, coaches that just because you wake up one day, you go to the gym a couple of times, put fit on your Instagram, and then you're now a strength and conditioning coach. But how important is it to go get those certifications? How important is it to, if you're interested in working with athletes in that field, to maybe get a degree in physical therapy, strength and conditioning, exercise science, in comparison just waking up and watching a couple Instagram videos and you're the guy.
I think like any degree should just be like an entry level acceptance into a career of learning about that thing, right? So like I got a doctorate degree in physical therapy, which was great, and I had an awesome experience at Columbia, and I learned a ton while I was there. But that was just like the start of my journey. Like I said, I've expanded in a lot of ways since then, and I've done mentorship programs since then. I've taken courses. I've done my own personal study, and it's just a mindset you have to have, that you have to be a lifelong learner about the topic, because things change, the way people think about things change, and if you get rooted in a particular way, then you're gonna miss out. No, I can say that courses I've been to, there's this thing in I'm sure not just physical therapy and other disciplines too, where you go to a course over the weekend, you learn a new technique, and you go to the office on Monday and you say, okay, I'm going to implement this technique right away. I think where it gets really interesting is when someone can go to a slew of courses and say, okay, I'm like picking out the best things that I can do from each course, and I'm going to implement it to the right person at the right time, instead of trying to force feed something I just learned into an athlete or a client that I'm working with. That's when it gets really interesting, is when you can appraise everything and take the best of everything, and then be able to understand that. That's where like real nuance comes in, right? Because any person can go on YouTube and watch a hitting video or a physical therapy video about how to do an exercise, but like where the real nuance comes in for a coach or a therapist is like finding like being able to evaluate when is the right time to do the right thing with the right person. That's where like the real expertise comes in, and that comes from learning over many years and appraising lots of different techniques, and studying, and just not locking yourself into one particular thing. It's a great topic. It's a great question.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
So are you Dr. James? Nice. Are you Dr. James? Yeah. Is there anything else you kind of want to share or talk about when it comes to preventing injuries, stretching, any type of, just like what's one thing you want to leave here that everyone could kind of take from this, right? And be like, I'm going to continue this. I'm going to take this with me in everything that I do going forward. What's like one piece of advice?
Okay, let's go through all the different aspects of recovery, and we'll talk about it. So sleep, like biggest thing is like youth athletes, like prioritize your sleep. It's so easy to like stay up at night, play video games, not prioritize your sleep. But like sleep is where so many critical, important things happen in your brain, building motor neurons that are going to help you encode those specific sports things that you learned from your coaches. To important hormones are released, like growth hormone and muscle repair. All that happens when you're sleeping. So it's especially critical to prioritize when you're younger, but always throughout your life, prioritize at least like 8-9 hours of sleep. That's huge. I'm giving that advice as like a parent to a baby who gets terrible sleep. So like but I know how important it is. Then talking about nutrition, like it's critical to wake up, start your day with like a protein dense meal as an athlete. Like get your day started with some calories. I've seen more athletes that need to build muscle than like it's so the majority of athletes need to put on muscle and weight, right? Like how many guys are you working with that are like twigs, right? When they're young and they don't have any physical strength. Like if you can like start your day with a huge protein rich meal, and prioritize like eating whole foods, proteins. I'll talk more about my own protein brand when we get to the end here. But that's huge. And I think that the recommended daily amounts of protein for athletes is so like low currently. Like I think we can double our protein recommendation and it still might not even be enough. So like really prioritize for muscle building and muscle growth, which is so important for performance in sports. Make that a priority in your life. Then from a movement standpoint, our takeaway was like, think about what the demands are of your sport and then make sure you prioritize a program that allows you to make sure that you're moving properly in all the ways you need to move for like an individual session that you're doing and then like grossly too, and being an athlete first and moving in all different kinds of ways through different sports throughout a year. It's critical. And then touching a little bit on just recovery gadgets and stuff too. We've like talked about like little bits of things like, you know, things for recovery like ice baths and saunas and heat and ice and massage and like all those things are great. And I've just when I was prepping for this, like I was just looking for evidence on all these things. And it's funny because anecdotally, so many of these things are great. Like, you know, Normatec boots and all this stuff and Theraguns and like all the fancy things. There's just not a lot of like randomized controlled trials floating around on these things. It's really hard to do studies on these things because there's so many other variables. But anecdotally, like athletes love them and they're all great, and find the tool that works best for you to make you feel good. But like I mentioned before, the biggest takeaway is no fancy gadget is ever going to make up for bad programming, like we talked about earlier. So prioritize your programming. That's like my biggest takeaway point. Prioritize good quality programming that builds your workload throughout a year, so that you can handle acute spikes in your training and not risk injury because you have such a good capacity of strength and mobility, because no amount of Theragunning after you pitch is ever going to make up for not being prepared to do it in the first place.
Yeah.
That's my takeaway.
I mean, those boom, boom, boom. That was fantastic. Oh, I did have one more question. I'm sorry that I have to, after you pitch, right? I feel like this is after you pitch, ice, heat, stretch. What should the athlete, what is the recommended, in your opinion, and what you do, what is the thing that they should be doing after they're throwing?
Yeah, I think going back to what I was saying before, the most important thing specifically after you pitch is just make sure you have full mobility and range of motion after. Like, do some guys love to go crush a workout after? Like, sure, like some people like that. Some people, like I said, they love all different modalities, whether it's ice or heat. Like, do whatever feels best for you in terms of that. But the highest priority thing for me is make sure, because your muscles go through a lot when you're pitching, especially your rotator cuff, your lat. But that stuff goes through it when you're pitching. And it's very, like, we see it, like I said, there's studies where like you acutely lose range of motion after you pitch because of the trauma that happens to your muscles when you de-pitch. So restore that right away, whether it's foam rolling, Theragunning, massage, like whatever it is after heat. Just make sure you have full range of motion the day after you pitch, because then you throw on one of your off days and all of a sudden you're tight in your shoulder, you didn't restore your range of motion, now you're at a higher risk for injury. Speaking of injury risks, so like hamstring strains, calf strains, do you know like what the highest risk factor is for those injuries? The number one risk factor for getting a hamstring strain is previously having a hamstring strain. So that goes for like a lot of different injuries that we talked about today. So the best preventative thing you can do is to be so resilient in the first place that it never happens in the first place. Having a good strength and conditioning program, a good mobility program, so you have full range of motion, you have the adequate strength to handle the demands of your sport, and then the other things we talked about, quality sleep, nutrition, all those things make you as resilient as possible so that you don't get injured in the first place. The best athlete's the one that can stay on the field the longest, right? I mean,
Best ability is able.
Yeah. I mean, LeBron has been at this for 20 plus years and he's always available, right? And obviously he has a lot of other things going for him, but he also just doesn't miss any time, right? I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for all that information. It's a lot of information, but it's so useful in a pool full of too much knowledge, right? Like, you could just Google something, you talk to this person, everyone's an expert, right? But like, just to kind of break it down, keep it simple, and just kind of tell everyone what they need to hear. And I feel like that's what you really communicated, because I learned so much today that I'm going to take to my athletes, and things I wish I knew when I was playing. And I'm sure with you too.
So let me ask you guys about that, because there's, my feed, I get a lot of physical therapy and training stuff pop up, and it's there's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of experts out there in the world, and some stuff is great, and you just have to be able to ask questions about things. I feel like that's helped me, where again, you listen to everybody, but then you appraise it for yourself. Now, because everybody can come across as an expert now with social media, you can have some degree of imposter syndrome, where it's like, wow, everybody knows this. Like, how can I be so confident in myself? As coaches and people that work in sports, like, how do you guys deal with social media, looking at what's out there, and then do you deal with any imposter syndrome, because there's just so many people out there that think that they know everything? And how do you know for sure that what you know is right or wrong when everyone says different things?
For me, kind of like going back to when you were talking about your friend getting outsourced for PT for the kid to look. I know I don't know everything. I know what I know, and I know that well. But I also like, I love to hear or see different drills, different feedback, different things, because I don't know everything, and I can't just go on Instagram or YouTube and just be like, oh, this person said it, so this must work. And then it becomes more of a picking and choosing. I've been coaching, for like 10 to 12 years. So I used to just grab everything and just see what works. And now I kind of know who my athletes are. I kind of know how the system goes, and I pick and choose. And then some stuff I kind of always stay true, which is mostly like the messaging, right? That never really changes. The messaging never changes on what I want the team to be. The only things that change are drills and different ideas of stretches and workouts. And, that's why, you were so graceful with you and John coming in and working out the team. Like, I know I don't know things about stretching and mobility. I know what I know, but it's not much, and I can't see it the same way you see it. So why not bring in people that are better than me to make everything better?
Yeah.
You know?
I think that that's a really powerful thing, because I find that people that I work with trust me because I'm willing to tell them if I don't know something. And you're the same way. You guys know what you know, and you know what you don't know. And when you pretend to know something to somebody, I think a lot of people can kind of sniff through that, right? This person's just trying to tell me an answer to give me an answer, but I don't know if I believe it. Like, I try to be really honest with people I work with and say, hey, like, but I'll be really objective about it. Like, I'll say, okay, based on how we assessed you, this is what I see going on at your right hip, and this is what I see going on at your core, and you have back pain, and back pain's really complicated and complex, and I don't know if you have a herniated disc or not. Like, I can't tell you that, but like, this is what I can tell you, and try to add value in that way, where it's like, okay, like, I can have a conversation without knowing all the answers, but people buy into that. And I think as a coach, as a healthcare professional, like, you're just looking for that buy-in from people, where you're working together. Maybe one person doesn't have all the answers. I don't expect myself to have all the answers, but I know that I'm going to work really hard with that person. And I know that if I need outside help, I'll get outside help. And I know you guys are the same way. And that's huge for working with athletes, because the point that you mentioned a couple times already, like, if you try to gatekeep an athlete and try to spew everything into them, and you don't know all the answers, but you pretend you do, then it only hurts the athlete. We brought this up a couple times now. Like, we have to do what's best for our kids. We have to do what's best for our athletes, and getting them answers when we don't know the answers is part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, so you have a little entrepreneurship going on.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'll talk about that. So I have a great physical therapy friend named Ran Wang. He recently moved to Florida, but we went to Columbia here together. Before he moved, we were just talking one day about how he just finished his MBA, and he wanted to take on something entrepreneurial. And I said, I really would love to have a product that can help foster, like, because we see in the physical therapy world, there's so many people that across their lifespan that they don't prioritize strength training, they don't prioritize protein intake, and people get older, and then we see what happens. I see what happens in the physical therapy world when people progress throughout their life and they don't prioritize those things. It makes, as they get older, life gets harder when you can't get up out of your chair as easily. Life gets harder when you can't do daily things to take care of yourself because you didn't prioritize strength training. So we got to talking and we say, okay, a way that we can help people is by educating people on how to intake enough protein into their diet and then prioritize the right amount of strength training during a week. So we created this this whey protein supplement. Lifelong Strong is special to me because that was my first company that I started. It was my physical therapy practice, which you mentioned during the intro was I was acquired over a year ago now, which was a really cool time for me, where I had a business that somebody thought was valuable. They took me on. I still get to work with them currently, and I got to take on a new opportunity with Google, which was that was a great move for me. But I got to keep the Lifelong Strong name, which was important for me. So now I've transitioned Lifelong Strong from a physical therapy business to now a business that aims to educate people on staying strong throughout their life. That was always my goal at my practice, is to tell people, like, you have the ability to stay strong forever if you work towards it. Everyone has that ability. And this protein is just a way for us to give that message to people, a message that you can, from whether you're a high school basketball player or someone that's 80 years old that wants to live independently. Everyone has the ability to be strong. Like I mentioned during our nutrition bit of this, people don't get enough protein in their diet on average. And we just want to give people a fun way to be able to do that. I love our flavors. We have a vanilla and a chocolate milkshake flavor that I put in my Greek yogurt every night. We sell on our website, which maybe we can put in the show notes, and I'll get you guys a discount code for your followers. But me and Rand are really passionate about this product because it's a lot more than just a protein powder. It's a mindset that people have the ability to stay strong and resilient throughout their life, and this is just a fun way to tack on to that. So thanks for letting me talk about that.
That's awesome, man. No, it's amazing. Like, not many people want to go to the next step of like supplements and this and that. And I mean, two of my kids got it, and they both were like, "Yo, that's great. That was one of the best proteins that I've had." So I was like, "Oh, cool. I love that for you," because there's so much out there.
There's a lot out there, and we really wanted to prioritize creating something that's really clean, that doesn't have a lot of additives in it. So we have a high amount of like pure protein content per every scoop without extra sugars and fillers. So we wanted to create something that's healthy, that mixes well, that doesn't bother people's guts. So whether you mix it in water or milk, I think it mixes really nice. I love it to mix it into my Greek yogurt. It's great in a smoothie. And it's just a fun way to increase your protein intake in a way that I think tastes pretty good.
Nice. Yeah, no, it's great. I'm working with a nutritionist now. I've been going to a nutritionist, and it's amazing that I thought I had to cut calories, but I need more calories in order to even like tone and lose weight. And I didn't realize how much I struggle just getting my protein and my caloric intake in, because I need to get to like 2,400 calories. She was saying, I was like, I don't think I even come near that on a day-to-day basis. So I'm looking for new ways to get my more protein in and this and that. So yeah,
My ass need protein, so I'll definitely be sharing that link ASAP.
yeah, it's exciting. You have anything else?
No, I'm good.
James, first guest, we appreciate you so much. Just knowing you for these past, I don't even know how long, but like 6, 7, 8 years.
I've known you since before I became a physical therapist. I started coming to do strength and conditioning probably at the beginning when I was in physical therapy school. So we're talking close to a decade at this point.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, just so happy for you doing your thing. It's amazing. And I appreciate you just doing us this favor, coming on and spreading your knowledge to whoever watches this.
It's going to be, I work with a lot of young kids, so this is going to go far with them and their parents. I think you got to educate the parents because they're the ones with the kids all the time, right? So I appreciate it big time.
Thanks, guys. It's been tons of fun. I appreciate it. You guys are doing good stuff.
Thank you.